LawrenceHits.com, it's Jay Walks, and joining us today is composer Kolby Van Camp, who it's been a number of years since you have been on the air with me. When last we were chatting with you, young man, you were a member of the Lawrence Children's Choir. How long ago was that?
Oh, man. I got out of Lawrence Children's Choir when I was in 10th grade.
Right.
And I am now getting ready to start my junior year of college.
It's impossible.
So I know. It seems like it's been a decade ago, but it really hasn't been that long. So
college for you is still in the state of Kansas. You were at the esteemed Kansas State University, which,
yes, indeed.
Which we will tolerate because so many of us in Lawrence and vicinity live in bi-college households.
I'm well aware of the university that we shall not name that exists in Lawrence, but
well, you call it bi-collegiate, and people say you're what?
Yeah,
no. We cheer for two schools. It's okay.
Yeah, it's all right. Yeah.
Well, lots of cool things have happened with you, and the most important of those things is you have gone into the business of composition. And tell me a little bit about going from singing and playing other people's music to creating your own. What has that transition been like for you?
So it's been kind of a fascinating experience. I first started dabbling in composition when I was about 16. My piano teacher, who's actually in Lawrence, a wonderful lady by the name of Dr. Sarah Higgins, and one day we just started talking about composition, and I never realized that her doctorate was in composition. So we just started doing some exercises, just doing some counterpoints, some melodies, seeing if we can come up with some stuff. And I discovered that I really enjoyed it. And, you know, it's funny that you bring up going from singing and performing other people's music to writing your own and seeing your own music performed. And it's kind of a fascinating experience in the fact that you do get to see your music performed. I refer to my compositions, they're kind of like my children, but some of them I love more than others. But the cool thing about my compositions is that they're all a part of me in some form or fashion. They've all expounded upon an experience that I've had or a collection of feelings that I've had. And they're just, I don't know, they're kind of their own entity that derive from me. And it's kind of a neat experience to be able to put them out to the world and see them grow up, per se. And
recently you were at the Kaufman Center, and correct. This was the National American Choral Directors Association Conference in Kansas City, and you got to see your composition In Flanders Fields performed, obviously, by someone else.
Right, and that was an especially moving experience for me because the ensemble that performed it was the men's choir Allegro Conspirito from Allegro Choirs of Kansas City, and that was an organization that I sang with after my time in the Lawrence Children's Choir. So when I finished with LCC in 10th grade, I moved on to Allegro until I graduated. I graduated high school, that is.
Right.
And their director, their current director, is one of my mentors, Dr. Christopher Smith. He actually teaches at Mid-American Nazarene University right now in Olathe. But I reached out to him. I had written this composition as a commission for one of the choral faculty here at K-State. And I said, I know that you guys are singing at the ACDA conference. I don't know if this would be something that would pique your interest. So just take a look at it. And he got back to me and he said, I love it. I'm going to program it, and at least we'll program it for the fall concert, and we'll see what happens with it afterwards. I said, that's great. That's all I really needed. It would just be super cool for me to see the guys in Spirito sing it and to see you conduct that. Kind of comes full circle, right? And so he comes to me in December and he says, hey, I just want you to know that we're at the ACDA conference here in February, that we're gonna perform your piece. We're gonna program it, and it's gonna be the only piece that Spirito sings by themselves in the concert. So I had the really cool experience to go over to the Kaufman Center, the just glorious Hellsberg Hall, and see that performed, and get to sit there with all of my choral nerd friends, the choral faculty at K-State, and just about 3,000 other choral directors from around the country, and just see my music performed. It was very awesome, very cool experience.
Where is Flanders Fields? Is that in your mind, or is it an actual place?
So Flanders Fields is based off of a poem by a World War I veteran, Dr. John McCrae, and it's based off of the Second Battle of Ypres, which happened in the Flanders area of Belgium.
Okay.
And it's characterized by the poppy. That's why the remembrance poppy exists, because the poppy grew kind of overnight in Flanders. It was because of all the attacks that were going on in that area, because the trenches were dug, because there was a constant shelling between armies that was occurring in that area. All the ground was overturned, and all these poppies that lied dormant underground for hundreds of years suddenly came alive. So literally almost overnight, this entire landscape of death and destruction was covered in blood red poppies.
Oh, wow.
And that's where the kind of the striking remembrance poppy comes from. And the first line of the poem is, "In Flanders Fields, the poppies grow between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place." And I recently discovered that I had a family member, kind of a distant family member, but a family member nonetheless, who was a hero in World War I. He was wounded while taking the Argonne Forest with a group of Missouri National Guardsmen, and among other high military honors, he received a Purple Heart. And I was very moved at discovering this, and then the commission occurred in 2018, and November of 2018 was the 100th year of the armistice that occurred for World War I. So it really all just made sense to set this text, and that's kind of where the place in my mind that it came from. So,
as if that were not enough, in the course of the last few months, you made your debut as an operatic soloist with a community symphony in Susanville, California.
Correct.
And not only is that a feat, given the geographic distance between Manhattan, Kansas, and Susanville, California,
right,
but you have a quasi-famous director who is the guy that they called Coach Wade, Ben Wade, from the TV show Survivor. How did that come about?
So, my freshman year, I decided that I was going to, my freshman year of college, I decided I was going to go home to my parents' house in Topeka, make a surprise visit. And Jay, you know my dad, you know how he loves TV shows. And he was addicted to Survivor for a little while, and he said, "You got to come see this guy. He's nuts." And I love it. I said, okay. So I come over, and there's this dude who's standing in the water conducting the symphony in his mind. I thought, oh my gosh, okay. So I said to Dad, I said, "Who is this guy?" And he said, "This is Coach Ben Wade." And then no sooner does he say that, they do like a little interview with him, and he says, "Oh yeah, I started a symphony in Susanville, California." And I said, "Yeah, right." So I Googled him, and sure enough, he started a symphony in Susanville, California. And they've existed for like 16 years. So I said to my dad, I said, "I'm going to email him and see what happens." So I emailed him. He emailed me right back. And he said, "Hey, great to hear from you. Send me a recording of you. Send me what you do. What do you do? Send me a biography." So I sent him a bunch of information about myself. And he there was radio silence for about 3 months, and I figured that he forgot or something. And I
now you had sent him Songs of the Prairie.
Yeah, so I had sent him a recording of kind of the title piece of that particular work, Lullaby of the Plains.
Okay.
Which is a composition that's dedicated to my grandfather. It was originally written for a solo baritone, myself, and piano accompaniment. And I sent that amongst some other recordings to him, and he finally got back to me and he said, "Hey, can we have a phone call?" I said, "Yeah, sure." So he calls me. He says, "I really want you to come out. I really want you to sing. And what can you do?" And I said, "Well, how about I take this piece, and I arrange it for orchestra, and then we can call that a world premiere, and we can have that world premiere, kind of run some publicity on that. And then I'm working on some opera stuff right now, so why don't I just grab one of the arias and bring that over? He said, that's great. So that happened. It was just a fabulous experience. What a wonderful little town, Susanville. It reminds me of small town Kansas, and I totally feel like I felt that I fit right in that moment with the week that I spent there. And I loved it. They loved me, and I'm very excited to know that I will be going back there sometime soon. I can't say for sure when yet, but sometime soon. I know that they'll be having me back. So,
what is the nearest city to Susanville that you can fly into?
I flew into Reno.
Oh,
and then,
okay.
They had somebody come over and pick me up. Yeah.
So that's not an easy hike.
No.
Is that like 2 or 3 hours driving once you get to Reno?
Actually, the driving was the easiest part. It's about an hour and a half to Susanville. But the flights were terrible. Oh my gosh. No. But
so how do you get from being in the composition business to being in the music publishing business? Because now you've hooked up with one of your friends, and now you have Novus Music Publishing. Is that taking a page out of the self-publication movement that seems to be omnipresent right now in the music industry?
Yeah. So there's kind of a monopoly that's occurred on choral music publishing specifically, where composers don't get paid nearly what they deserve to be paid, and they often lose their copyrights when they sign a contract with one of the big publishing companies of today. That they sign the copyright over to that company, and then they don't ever get it back. They lose it forever. And that's kind of a disturbing thought to me. It was like I made the metaphor that all my compositions are my children. It's like signing over a child to someone that I don't want to sign it over to. I've been considering some self-publishing. There's a company out right now that's actually based out of Kansas City. It's called Music Spoke, and it's kind of an online marketplace for composers to put their works out in a published format. And it's kind of an exclusive group. You have to know somebody to get in with them. But their model is that composers get paid 70% of all the royalties and you keep the copyright.
Wow.
Hey, that's a great model.
That is a huge juxtaposition to the traditional model, where you're lucky if you get 15 cents on the dollar.
Right, exactly. So that was that, plus another company that I'm currently published with, a little company called Petrucci Press, that has a very similar model. That was kind of inspired me, and in a phone call I had with a close friend and a fellow composer of mine, a guy named Jesse Kaiser. He's a student at the University of South Carolina in composition, and I said to him, I'm kind of thinking of self-publishing some music. He said, yeah, I've kind of been thinking of that too. I said, hey, do you want to start a publishing company? And he said, sure, why not? So that's pretty much exactly how that happened.
Well, I mean, that's a cool story, because if you look at the history of music, there have been so many legal battles over the rights to the songs. Who owns them? Does the composer own them? Does the catalog own them? Does the legacy or the estate own them? Who's the actual owner? And a lot of some of the bigger named artists over the years have endeavored to buy back their catalog so that they could control their own destiny, if you will. So it's kind of cool. Yeah.
So the big thing that we believe in with Novus Music Publishing is that our motto is from the composers of today for the composers of tomorrow. And our idea is that we are willing to look at far more eclectic music than most publishing companies would look at. There's kind of a set idea of what should be published and what shouldn't be. And part of our mission is just to kind of smash that. Say, if you have something that makes sense, and or even if something that doesn't entirely make sense, as long as you can have an explanation for what you're doing, then we would be more than happy to take a look at it and see if it's something that would fit with us in publication. So I'm published with it. My buddy Jesse's published with it. There's a guy, a fabulous pianist and a good friend of mine. His name is John Young. He's currently a doctoral student at KU. He has some piano works published with us. I have a friend of mine here at K-State, a fabulous marimbist named Braden Baumgartner, who has some stuff published with us. So it's starting to pick up. It's very, very slow. Right now it's also kind of exclusive, a little bit at invitation only. But we just dropped our founding collection here in the end of February. So
I mean, for the amount of time that you've put into it, I think you've made remarkable progress.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
So one of my favorite shows of the last few years on television was a cable television show called Mozart in the Jungle. And this particular show details the life of an orchestra conductor who is constantly in the shadow of and trying to impress the great Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart.
Right.
When you think about the composers that have influenced you, if you had the opportunity to have a posthumous conversation with just one of them, who would it be and why?
So it's interesting that you say that, because a lot of the composers that I would consider have a lot of influence on me right now are all living, and I've actually been able to sit down and have at least a quick conversation with all of them, except one, and that one is Sergei Rachmaninoff. I adore his piano music. His Piano Concerto No. 3 in D minor is probably the most prolific and difficult concerto ever written, and it's just some genius stuff. He wrote what's called the All-Night Vigil, or Vespers. That the Kansas City Chorale actually won the Choral Grammy for Best Album in 2016 with a recording of Rachmaninoff's All-Night Vigil. And I would just love to sit down with him and say, what was your inspiration? Where did this come from? We can look at the music, and just through analysis, we can pull out parts of that's Orthodox chant. He was,
what is the old phrase? A muse comes in many different forms.
Right. Yeah. So I would love to just kind of sit down and pick his brain and say, okay, why'd you do this? I'd love to sit down with a score and say, why'd you do this? What does this mean? What are you trying to convey here? Because, there's so many different interpretations to one sheet of music. It's like politics. We can all look at the same thing and come to about 80 different conclusions. It's the exact same thing with music. But I would just love to be able to sit down with someone as genius as Rachmaninoff and say, how did you do it? Why did you do it? What was your motivation? Did you like any of it? Did you hate your music? Did you like your music? There's so many questions I would love to ask him. But
no doubt about that. Well, you're a junior in college. Yes, you are composing. You are performing. You are working on publishing music. A lot to be done. Yet on top of that, as if that wasn't enough, recently you had the world premiere of a piece in Kansas City with a college choir. And on top of that, a world premiere of a piece with a high school choir in Colorado Springs. And then on top of that, you're going to be one of the soloists in Kansas State's performance of Mozart's Requiem. How in the world do you have time to do all of this?
It really tests my time management skills. I can't lie. There's those compositions, luckily, I'd had finished for a little while and kind of had sitting in my pocket until the right group came along. The group in Kansas City is actually an American Nazarene. My mentor, Dr. Smith, is actually he conducted that yesterday. And it was a wonderful performance. I was sorry to have missed it, but I'm very excited to hear the recording. And then the piece that premieres in Colorado Springs was written as a wedding present for a friend of mine, a close friend of mine who got married last year.
Oh, nice.
It was really cool. It was a collaboration between myself and a fellow artist in Topeka, a poet by the name of Annette Hope Billings, and she just writes some really fabulous stuff. And so she wrote me a poem, I said it, and I presented it as a present to my friend, and I'm excited to hear it. It premieres on Thursday. And then, geez, just learning Mozart's Requiem by itself tests your time management, let alone to add all that other stuff. But, you got to take it in chunks, small chunks, and spread it out over a couple months. You can get it done. Probably.
I have been blessed to have a lot of friends who are musicians, and I always ask the same question, and I'll ask this of you as well, Kolby, is in 2019, how does a musician and a composer promote themselves? What do you do to make sure that people are aware of you, aware of your music, aware of your availability? How do you get the word out?
So it's astounding what you can do with an email. And I've told this to a number of people, especially after I sang with the Susanville Symphony, because all of that started with an email. I just emailed them. And a lot of the time, musicians are too... They can't handle the rejection. They don't want to have somebody say, "No, I don't want you to come sing with me." And that's just the name of the game. You got to be able to put yourself out there. You got to be able to contact people. You got to be able to hit people up and just say, "Hey, here's who I am. This is what I do. I'd love to sing with you." And if they say no, then you know what? That's their loss.
You know that was actually a poem. Here's who I am. Here's what I do. I'd love to come and sing with you. See, you're a lyricist when you can just rhyme off the top of your head. That was brilliant.
The minute I said that, I actually thought to myself, that rhymed, but that was
there you go.
Completely serendipitous, I promise. But the best advice, some of the best advice I've ever received was actually from my voice teacher here at K-State, Dr. Brian Pinkel, and he said, "You know that you've arrived when you get to say no." And I have not yet arrived because I'm still saying yes to everything. I have to get to a place where I can turn people down. But like I said, you'll know that you've arrived when you get to say to somebody, "Hey, I have too many engagements. No, I can't sing for you." And that's kind of what you have to shoot for.
We are blessed to have had time with you today, and very, very proud of all that you've accomplished in the years since our first interview, all the way back to 2013 when we were in our little location at the corner of 8th and Mass downtown. If you'd like to learn more about Kolby Van Camp, he has a website. It's Kolby with a K, Kolby, van like the vehicle you drive, VAN, camp like summer, CAMP.com, KolbyVanCamp.com. And I can guarantee you we're going to be hearing a lot more from this young man as time goes on.
Thanks, Jay. I appreciate it.
All right, Kolby Van Camp on LawrenceHits.com. Thanks for listening.